It's late where you are, maybe very late. Maybe you're in bed already, the room dark, the day finally finished, and you found this before sleep arrived. Or maybe sleep hasn't been easy lately, and the quiet has too much space in it, and you needed something to fill the dark with. Wherever you are right now, tell me, what city, what country, what kind of night surrounds you? Because I want to say something to you before we go any further, something that physicists know and almost never say out loud, because it doesn't fit neatly into papers or lectures or the language of science as it is usually practiced. You are immortal, not in the way you've been told not to believe in, not in a religious sense, though this touches territory that religion has always known belonged to it. Not in the sense that you will live forever in the body you have now, in the room you're lying in tonight, in a different sense, a physical sense, a sense that comes directly from what matter is, from what energy does, from what the universe has never once, in 14 billion years, allowed to happen. The universe has never destroyed anything, not once, not a single atom, not a single photon, not a single joule of energy that ever existed. Everything that has ever been, still is, somewhere, in some form, following some path through the structure of a cosmos that does not know the word nothing. Your body, right now, is made of atoms that have existed since the first few minutes after the Big Bang. Not atoms like those atoms, the same ones, rearranged, yes, passed through stars, through oceans, through other bodies, but never created new and never destroyed. And when the arrangement that is you eventually changes, because it will change, that is also physics, none of those atoms will disappear. They will continue. They will become other things, other arrangements, other moments in the long story of matter moving through time. This is not comfort designed to make you feel better. This is the first law of thermodynamics. This is conservation of energy. This is the structure of reality as physicists have measured it, tested it, and confirmed it in every experiment ever run. You are not going anywhere. You're already everywhere you've ever been, and you will be everywhere the universe still has to go. Tonight, let's explore what that actually means, slowly, in the dark, together. Let's start with the most basic fact in all of physics, because almost everything else tonight will rest on it. Energy cannot be created. Energy cannot be destroyed. Energy can only change form. This is the first law of thermodynamics, and it is one of the most thoroughly tested statements in the history of human inquiry. It has been confirmed in every laboratory, in every experiment, in every physical system ever studied, from subatomic particles to galaxy clusters. No exception has ever been found, not one. What does this actually mean, in plain terms? It means that the total amount of energy in the universe has been the same since the universe began. Not approximately the same, exactly the same. The number hasn't changed. It cannot change. The universe is a closed system with a fixed energy budget, and every transaction inside it is a rearrangement, never a creation, never a deletion. Now here is the part that matters for tonight. You are made of energy. Not poetically, not metaphorically, literally and precisely. The matter that composes your body, every atom of carbon, every molecule of water, every ion moving through your neurons right now as you listen to this, is energy in one of its most organized and stable forms. Einstein showed us this with his famous equation. Mass and energy are the same thing. They are different expressions of a single underlying reality, which means that you, as a physical system, as a quantity of energy arranged in a particular way, are subject to the first law. You cannot be created from nothing, and you cannot be destroyed into nothing. Before the particular arrangement of atoms that became you was assembled, Those atoms existed elsewhere. They were in soil, in water, in air, in other organisms, in the deep geological record of this planet. They were in supernova before the Earth existed. Some of them were in the Big Bang itself, in the first 3 minutes of the universe. And when the arrangement changes, and it will change, because all arrangements change eventually, the energy doesn't vanish, it disperses, it reorganizes, it continues as something else, which will continue as something else, in an unbroken chain of continuation that has no end in sight. This is not mysticism. This is the most boring, well-confirmed, foundational statement in physics. And yet, when you sit with it quietly, in the dark, before sleep, it stops feeling boring very quickly. You have always existed, in one form or another, and you always will. That sentence is physics. There is a word that gets used too loosely, and it matters enormously for what we're talking about tonight. That word is death. In common usage, death means the end of something, the cessation, the point at which a thing stops being and becomes nothing. We use it as a synonym for disappearance, but in physics, nothing disappears. This is not a loophole. It is not a trick of language or a comforting reframe. It is the most literal possible reading of what physics actually describes when it describes what happens to matter and energy over time. When a star dies, it does not cease to exist. It collapses, or explodes, or fades. The material it contains scatters through space, seeding the regions around it with the heavy elements that took billions of years of nuclear fusion to produce. That material forms new clouds, new stars, new planets, new chemistry. The star's death is not an ending. It is a transformation so radical that we call it an ending, because the original pattern is gone, but the substance of the star is still entirely present in the universe. When a candle burns, the wax does not disappear. The chemical bonds break. The molecules of hydrocarbon are broken down and combined with oxygen, releasing photons of light and molecules of carbon dioxide and water vapor. Every atom that was in the candle is still somewhere, in the air of the room, in the walls, eventually in a plant somewhere, or a cloud, or your lungs. When a living body stops living, the arrangement that was that body begins to change. Molecules are broken down by bacteria, by chemical processes, by time. The atoms disperse into the soil, the water, the air. They're taken up by other organisms, they cycle, they continue. Nothing that was there goes anywhere. Now apply this to yourself, not as a thought experiment, but as a physical description. The atoms that compose you right now were here before you were born, in other forms, and they will be here after the arrangement that is you has changed. In other forms, the pattern changes, the energy does not. Whether the pattern is what matters, whether there is something beyond the pattern, is the question that physics leaves genuinely open. And that open door is the most interesting thing about all of this. Tonight we're walking through that door slowly, one room at a time, as the body settles and the mind softens and sleep approaches from somewhere just beyond the last clear thought. Let's talk about atoms, because atoms are the place where the abstract becomes specific and strange. Your body contains approximately 7 octillion atoms. That is a 7 followed by 27 zeros. 7,000 million, million. A number so large that if you counted 1 per second without stopping, you would need roughly 220 trillion years to finish, more than 15,000 times the current age of the universe. Each of those atoms is ancient. The hydrogen atoms in your body, and your body is about 60% water, which is 2 hydrogen atoms per oxygen. Those hydrogen atoms were created in the first 3 minutes after the Big Bang. They have been in existence for approximately 13.8 billion years. They have been inside stars. They have been in the interstellar medium. They have been in oceans and clouds and organisms and geological formations. And now they are in you. The heavier atoms, the carbon that forms the backbone of every organic molecule in your body, the oxygen, the nitrogen, the iron in your blood, those were forged inside stars. Not metaphorically. They were literally produced by nuclear fusion reactions in stellar cores, then scattered through space when those stars ended. The iron in your blood is stellar ash. None of those atoms were created for you. None of them belong to you in any permanent sense. You are a temporary arrangement, a particular configuration that the universe has assembled from pieces that have been in circulation since before the Earth existed and will continue circulating long after. But here's what strikes me as important. Those atoms have passed through extraordinary things. They have been inside stellar cores at temperatures of millions of degrees. They have been part of living creatures we have no names for. They carry no memory of those journeys in any recoverable sense, but the journeys happened, and the atoms persisted through all of them, unchanged in their fundamental nature. An atom of carbon in your body tonight is exactly the same kind of thing as a carbon atom in the core of a distant star. Same protons, same neutrons, same electrons. The universe makes one kind of carbon. All of it was made the same way. All of it will last the same amount of time, which is indefinitely, as far as physics currently knows. You are assembled from pieces of the universe that the universe has been carrying since it began. That is not a metaphor. That is chemistry and physics, and the conservation of matter stated plainly. Let that settle for a moment before we go further. There is a concept in physics called the conservation of information, and it is one of the strangest, most debated, most consequential ideas in modern theoretical physics. It is also the place where the question of immortality stops being metaphorical and starts being mathematically serious. The idea begins with quantum mechanics. At the quantum level, the state of any physical system can be described by what physicists call a wave function, a mathematical object that encodes everything there is to know about that system. Every particle, every atom, every arrangement of matter and energy has a wave function that describes it completely. The conservation of information says this: that wave function never truly disappears. It can evolve. It can become extraordinarily complex, spread across many particles, entangled with the environment in ways that make it practically impossible to read. But it cannot be destroyed. The information encoded in the quantum state of any system is, in principle, permanent. This was the center of one of the most famous debates in modern physics, the so-called black hole information paradox. Stephen Hawking originally proposed that black holes could destroy information, swallowing matter and eventually evaporating through Hawking radiation without preserving any record of what they consumed. If true, this would violate the conservation of information, and most physicists found this deeply troubling. Decades of theoretical work, culminating in what is sometimes called the black hole wars, has led most physicists to believe that Hawking was wrong about this, that even black holes preserve information, that the quantum state of everything that falls in is somehow encoded in the radiation that eventually comes out, scrambled beyond any practical recovery, but preserved. Nothing is lost, not even in the most extreme physical process the universe produces. What does this mean for you? Lying here in the dark, breathing slowly, on the edge of sleep. It means that the quantum state that describes you, every particle in your body, every relationship between those particles, every pattern of energy that constitutes what you physically are, is information. And if the conservation of information holds, as most physicists now believe it does, that information is not destroyed when the arrangement changes. It is scrambled. It is dispersed across the universe in a form that cannot practically be recovered. But it is there, encoded in the fabric of physical reality, in the correlations between particles that will never entirely lose the memory of what they once were part of. You leave a mark on the universe that the universe keeps, always. The question of what you are precisely is one that physics and philosophy have never fully agreed on, and the disagreement is more interesting than any settled answer would be. On one view, you are the pattern, the arrangement, the specific configuration of atoms and energy that has a particular history, makes particular choices, experiences the world in a particular way. The atoms are just the medium, the way that ink is the medium for a poem. The poem is not the ink. It is the pattern the ink makes. Change the ink, the poem remains. Destroy the pattern, and the poem is gone, even if every molecule of ink still exists somewhere. On this view, when the arrangement changes, you are gone, even though your atoms persist. The atoms continue, but you do not. Immortality of matter, not immortality of self. This is a reasonable view. Many physicists hold it implicitly. But there is another view, and it is harder to dismiss than it appears. On this view, the distinction between pattern and substance is not as clean as it seems, because the pattern is not separate from the energy. The pattern is a property of the energy, a way the energy is organized, and if the energy persists, and the information encoded in that energy persists, then something of the pattern persists too. Not in a recoverable form, not in a form you would recognize as the same person, but as a set of constraints, relationships, correlations that the universe carries forward. Think of it this way. When you speak, you create sound waves. Those waves travel outward, interact with everything they meet, are absorbed and reflected and dispersed. Within seconds, the specific sound wave is gone, indistinguishable from the background. But the energy of those waves has been added to the thermal motion of the air, the walls, the objects in the room. The room is, in a completely unmeasurable but physically real sense, slightly different because you spoke. You change the universe, and the universe keeps the change. Every moment of your existence has altered the state of the physical world in ways that propagate forward through time, not memorably, not recognizably, but permanently. You're woven into the universe in ways that cannot be unwoven. This is not poetry designed to comfort you, though you're welcome to be comforted by it. This is the structure of a physical system in which causality is real, in which every event has effects, and in which those effects do not disappear. The universe remembers, even when we cannot. There is a thought experiment that physicists and philosophers have used for centuries to probe the nature of identity, and it becomes newly strange when you place it inside the framework we've been building tonight. The ship of Theseus. You know the story, perhaps. A ship is preserved in a harbour as a monument. Over time, its planks rot and are replaced, one by one. After enough time, every single plank of the original ship has been replaced. Is it still the same ship? Now extend it further. Someone collects all the original planks, repairs them, assembles them back into a ship. Which one is the ship of Theseus? This is not an idle puzzle. It is a direct question about whether identity lives in material or in pattern, in substance or in continuity, in what something is made of or in what it is organized to do. And now apply it to you. The atoms of your body are not the same atoms you had 7 years ago. Almost every cell in your body has been replaced, sometimes several times over. The matter that constituted you as a child is scattered across the world now, in the soil, in the water, in other organisms, yet you have an unbroken sense of being the same person. You have memories, habits, a persistent sense of self that bridges all those replacements. So which is you? The atoms or the pattern? If it's the pattern, then the pattern has demonstrated remarkable resilience. It has survived the complete replacement of its physical substrate multiple times. It persists not because the matter is the same, but because the organization is maintained. The pattern maintains itself, and if the pattern can maintain itself through complete material replacement while the organism is alive, then the question of what happens when it doesn't is at least more interesting than we usually allow. What does it mean for a pattern to end? If the energy that was carrying it doesn't end, where does the organization go? These are not questions physics has answered. They are questions physics has made more precise and more strange by understanding how deep the conservation laws go, how thoroughly the universe preserves information, how completely causality ensures that nothing simply vanishes. You are a pattern that has already survived complete material replacement several times. The universe has a long and unbroken record of not destroying things. Put those two facts side by side, in the dark, and let them sit there together without needing to resolve into anything. There is no resolution required tonight, only attention. Let's talk about what happens when a star dies, because it is the closest analogy the universe has to what we call death, and understanding it changes the emotional weight of that word considerably. A star like our Sun exists in a state of dynamic balance. The outward pressure of nuclear fusion in its core, the constant explosion of hydrogen into helium at temperatures of 15 million degrees, precisely counterbalances the inward pull of gravity. This balance is maintained for billions of years, as long as the fuel holds. When the fuel runs low, the balance breaks. The core contracts. The outer layers expand enormously. The star becomes a red giant, swelling to many times its original size, its surface cooling as it spreads. Eventually, for a star our size, the outer layers are shed entirely, forming a glowing shell of gas called a planetary nebula, one of the most beautiful objects in the universe. What remains is the core, compressed to a sphere roughly the size of Earth, but with the mass of a star, a white dwarf, incredibly dense, fading slowly over billions of years as it radiates away its remaining heat. Eventually, theoretically, it becomes a black dwarf, a cold, dark remnant indistinguishable from the background. But notice what has happened. Every atom that was in the star is still somewhere. The planetary nebula drifts through space, enriching the surrounding gas with carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, the products of the star's nuclear history. That gas will eventually be incorporated into new molecular clouds, new stars, new planetary systems. The heavy elements the star spent billions of years making are now available to the universe for the first time. Seeds of chemistry, seeds of planets, seeds of life. The star did not end. The star transformed. What was organized energy in a particular form became organized energy in other forms, dispersed across space, contributing to the next generation of complexity. This is the pattern the universe follows, not annihilation, transformation, not ending. Continuation in a different key, and a human body, when the arrangement that organizes it stops being maintained, follows the same pattern. The molecules are broken down, the atoms disperse, they enter the cycling systems of the biosphere, the soil chemistry, the water cycle, the food web. They become other things, and those things become other things, in an unbroken chain of rearrangement that the universe has been running since it began. The star died and became the material for a world where someone is lying in the dark, thinking about stars. That chain has no break in it anywhere. There is a physicist named Sean Carroll who has written carefully about what he calls the arrow of time, and his work illuminates something that is worth sitting with for a few minutes in the quiet of this night. Time, in physics, is strange. The fundamental laws of physics, the equations that govern the behavior of particles at the most basic level, are time-symmetric. They work equally well in both directions. Run them forward, and the physics works. Run them backward, and the physics also works. There is nothing in the fundamental equations that distinguishes the past from the future. The directionality of time, the reason your memories go backward and not forward, the reason a broken cup doesn't reassemble itself, the reason the smoke from a candle disperses rather than reconcentrating. All of that comes not from the fundamental laws, but from a single initial condition. The universe began in a state of extraordinarily low entropy, extraordinary organization, and has been moving toward greater disorder ever since. What this means, technically, is that there is a direction to things. Hot becomes cold, organized becomes dispersed. Complex structures that require specific conditions to exist eventually degrade when those conditions are no longer maintained. But here is the thing that Carroll and others point out. The degradation is not destruction. It is redistribution. When the organization of your body eventually stops being maintained, the energy doesn't vanish. It spreads. It distributes into the environment. It becomes slightly warmer air, slightly different chemical concentrations, slightly altered quantum states of the particles that were near you. In the language of thermodynamics, the low entropy state that was you becomes higher entropy states that are everything else. The information that described you, in the technical sense, is preserved in the correlations between these particles, though it is now scrambled across so many systems that no practical process could ever reassemble it. But practically impossible is not the same as gone. The difference between gone and scrambled beyond recovery is the difference between a fire that destroyed a book and a fire that scattered its words into the air. The words are no longer readable, but they are not nowhere. They are in the smoke, in the ash, in the slight warming of the air, in the changed state of every particle that the fire touched. You will become unreadable. You will not become absent. And in the particular physics of a universe that conserves everything, there is a meaning in that distinction that goes further than comfort. It is the description of what actually happens, stripped of every addition and every reduction, just the plain account of matter and energy in time. Let's consider something that sounds strange but follows directly from the physics we've been exploring. You've already been part of things that would astonish you. The atoms in your body have histories that span 13.8 billion years, and the range of environments those atoms have moved through is effectively the entire history of the universe. Some of the hydrogen atoms in the water molecules in your cells were formed in the first 3 minutes of existence, when the universe was a hot, dense plasma of protons and electrons cooling rapidly enough for hydrogen to finally become stable. They have been hydrogen for almost 14 billion years. Some of the carbon atoms in your body were forged in a star that died before our sun existed. They were blasted into space in a supernova. They drifted through the interstellar medium for millions of years. They were swept up into the molecular cloud that eventually collapsed to form our solar system. They became part of the early Earth. They cycled through the atmosphere, the oceans, the geological record. They passed through organisms, possibly many, across hundreds of millions of years of biological history before arriving, through food, through breath, in the arrangement that is currently you. That carbon atom has been inside a stellar core. It has floated in interstellar space. It has been part of a geological formation. It has been part of a living organism. It is currently part of you. What will it be next? That question cannot be answered now. But the direction is clear. It will not stop. It will not disappear. It will continue through whatever forms the physics of this planet and this solar system and this galaxy provide for it in the time remaining to those systems. In 10 billion years, our sun will exhaust its fuel and expand and shed its outer layers, and the atoms of this planet will be scattered into space, and some of those atoms will end up in new systems, in new stars, in new planets, in whatever kind of chemical complexity those systems produce. Your atoms will participate in that, some of them, continuing the chain that they have been part of since the universe was 3 minutes old. This is not poetic. It is the logical consequence of the conservation laws applied to a specific set of atoms with a specific history. You're a chapter in a story that started at the beginning of everything and has no visible end. Let that feel like what it is, not small, vast. There is a question that naturally arises at this point, and it deserves to be asked honestly rather than dissolved in abstraction. Does any of this matter if the thing that experiences it, the consciousness, the felt sense of being you, does not continue? It is the right question. It is possibly the central question, and it is one that physics approaches with what can only be described as exquisite caution. The hard problem of consciousness, as the philosopher David Chalmers named it, is the question of why physical processes give rise to subjective experience at all. Why is there something it is like to be you, rather than all the same processes simply occurring in the dark, with no inner light, no felt quality, no experience of any of it? Physics can describe, with extraordinary precision, what the neurons in your brain are doing when you feel something. It can map the electrical patterns, the chemical cascades, the network dynamics. What it cannot do, and what no scientific theory has yet done, is explain why any of that would be accompanied by the feeling of being you. This gap between the physical description and the felt experience is real. It has not been closed. Many physicists and neuroscientists proceed as if it will be closed eventually, as if consciousness is simply what complex information processing feels like from the inside, and that once we understand the processing well enough, the experience will follow as a natural consequence. Others are less sure. They point to the fact that no arrangement of equations or mechanism, however complex, has ever been shown to logically require experience. You can describe every physical process in the brain and still, in principle, ask why it feels like anything. What this means for immortality is this: the physical arguments we have been making are solid. The matter persists, the energy persists, the information, in the technical sense, persists in the structure of the universe. Whether what persists is you, in the sense that matters most, depends on questions that physics has not yet answered. And the fact that physics has not answered them is itself significant. It means the door is not closed. It means the dismissal is not warranted. It means that the honest position is not confidence in either direction, but a genuine and well-grounded uncertainty that has room in it for more than the materialist account usually allows. You're lying in the dark, and you are something. Something that experiences. Something that feels the weight of its own body, the slowing of its own breath, the approach of sleep. What that something is and where it goes, physics has not finished saying. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is not the mainstream view, but it is a serious one, held by serious physicists, and it has implications for tonight's subject that are too strange and too interesting to leave out. Quantum mechanics, in its standard formulation, describes particles not as having definite properties, but as existing in superpositions, combinations of multiple possible states simultaneously. When a measurement is made, the superposition appears to collapse, and one outcome is observed. The many worlds interpretation, developed by Hugh Everett in 1957, takes a different approach. Rather than saying the superposition collapses, It says all outcomes occur. When a measurement is made, the universe branches. One branch contains the observer seeing outcome A. Another branch contains the observer seeing outcome B. Both are equally real. Neither is more the true universe than the other. They simply no longer interact. If this interpretation is correct, it has a consequence that is difficult to think about calmly. Every quantum event that has ever occurred, every radioactive decay, every photon interaction, every electron state transition has produced a branching of the universe. The number of branches is unimaginably large. In each branch, a slightly different history has unfolded. In the vast majority of those branches, you exist. In some, you have already made different choices, had different experiences, are having a different night than this one. In some branches, events that ended lives in this branch went differently. Not because of anything dramatic, but because at the quantum level, the outcomes of events are genuinely probabilistic, and in the ensemble of all branches, all outcomes that are physically possible are realized somewhere. This is not comforting in a straightforward sense. It doesn't mean you won't die in this branch. It means the question of what death means across the full structure of reality becomes dramatically more complicated. Your existence is not a single thread. If Everett was right, it is a branching tree, spreading through possibility space at every moment, realizing outcomes in directions you will never know about. The version of you that falls asleep tonight continues into a tomorrow in some branches. The pattern propagates forward in as many directions as physics allows until the conditions that maintain it change in each branch on its own timeline. This is not consolation. It is one of the stranger things that a serious theory of reality implies, if you take it seriously. Lie with it quietly. Don't try to resolve it. Some ideas are too large to close, and the right response to them is not resolution, but a kind of wide and patient attention. Let's talk about time in a slightly different way. Because the way we experience time and the way physics describes time are so different that the gap between them is worth exploring in the particular clarity that a late night sometimes offers. You experience time as moving, as flowing from past through present to future. As a river, you are carried along, unable to stop, unable to go back. The past is gone, fixed, inaccessible. The future is coming, unknown, impossible to hold still. Physics describes something quite different. In special relativity, time is a dimension, not a flow. It is a coordinate in a four-dimensional structure called space-time, in which all events, past, present, and future, exist simultaneously. Not in the sense that they are all happening at once, but in the sense that they are all equally real, equally present in the structure of space-time, equally located at their coordinates. The physicist Brian Greene calls this the block universe, because in this picture, the universe is not something that is happening. It is something that exists, complete, with all of its history and all of its future already there in the four-dimensional structure. Your birth is a location in space-time. Your death, whenever it occurs, is a location in space-time. Every moment of your life is a location in space-time. None of those locations cease to exist when you move on from them. They are fixed, permanent, as real in the four-dimensional structure of reality as the chair you might be sitting in or the ceiling above you. You cannot go back to them, but they are not gone. The version of you that existed 10 years ago, that specific configuration of matter and experience, exists at a set of coordinates in space-time that are just as real as your current coordinates. The universe contains both. The past is not destroyed by the present. It is simply prior, located at earlier coordinates in the same structure. This is not the same as saying you will live forever in any experiential sense, but it does say something extraordinary. It says that every moment you have ever had is a permanent feature of the structure of reality, that the universe, in its full four-dimensional extent, contains you completely, not just the current you, all of you, every version, at every time, at every coordinate you have occupied. You cannot be removed from space-time. You are there, and there is permanent. In the block universe, you are not a passing event. You are a permanent object, extended in time as well as space, present at your coordinates forever. There is a beautiful and underappreciated science called ecology, which studies not the individual but the web, and which sees things that are invisible when you focus only on the single organism. In ecology, there is a concept called the cycling of matter. The atoms that make up living things are not consumed by life. They are borrowed from the non-living world, organized into living structures, and then returned when those structures are no longer maintained. Life does not create its own material. It takes material from the environment, uses it, and gives it back. The carbon cycle is the most famous of these. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is taken up by plants through photosynthesis and converted into organic molecules. Animals eat plants, incorporating that carbon into their own bodies. When organisms die, decomposers break down the organic molecules, releasing carbon back into the soil and atmosphere. The carbon cycles. It has been cycling for billions of years, the same atoms, moving through plants and animals and soil and air and ocean, in an unbroken circulation that has been running since before complex life existed. You are part of that cycle right now. The carbon in your body is currently on a temporary detour through human form. Before this, it was in other forms. After this, it will be in other forms. The cycle doesn't pause for you, and it doesn't end when you leave it. It simply continues, having been altered very slightly by the particular path your atoms took through it. Now scale this up, because the carbon cycle is just one example of the general principle. Every element in your body cycles. Nitrogen, through the nitrogen cycle, through soil, bacteria, and plants and animals and decomposers. Phosphorus, through the phosphorus cycle, slower, deeper, moving through geological timescales as well as biological ones. Hydrogen and oxygen, through the water cycle, through evaporation and precipitation and transpiration, through the oceans and the ice caps and the clouds. You are a temporary configuration in a set of cycles that run on timescales from years to billions of years. You pass through, you're changed by it, and it is changed very slightly by you, and then you return to it, and it continues. There is nothing in this that is small. The cycles that will receive your atoms back have been running since before complex life, and will run long after. You're returning to something ancient, and something that will outlast everything we know. That returning is not a loss. It is a homecoming into something that has always been there. The physicists who refuse to talk about this, the ones mentioned in the title of tonight's journey, are not being dishonest. They are being careful. The careful thing, in physics, is to stay close to what the mathematics says, and to be extremely cautious about what you claim those mathematics mean for questions like consciousness, identity, or experience. These are questions that have a long history of being answered too quickly and too confidently, in directions that turned out to be wrong. So they talk about conservation of energy without connecting it to immortality. They talk about conservation of information without connecting it to the persistence of self. They describe the block universe without dwelling on what it means to be a permanent object in four-dimensional space-time. They discuss quantum branching without following the thread of what it implies for the continuity of experience. This caution is reasonable. It is probably the right professional practice. But in the quiet of a late night, in the particular kind of attention that the hours before sleep produce, caution is not what is needed. What is needed is honesty about what the physics actually implies, without the professional filter, without the anxiety about being misunderstood, and what the physics implies taken together is genuinely extraordinary. Matter persists, energy persists, information persists, in principle, in the structure of quantum correlations that the universe carries forward. Time is a dimension, and every event that occurs is a permanent fixture of the space-time structure. The cycles of matter have no end in sight. The branching of quantum possibility expands continuously into futures that none of us can map. And in the middle of all of this, you exist. Not as a temporary irrelevance, not as an accident, as a specific, precise, unrepeatable configuration of matter and energy and information that the universe has assembled from material it has been carrying since the Big Bang. You are not something the universe is tolerating for a short while before discarding you. You are something the universe is doing, a process it is running, a pattern it is maintaining, for as long as the conditions for maintaining it hold, and then transforming, as it transforms everything, into other forms that will carry the traces of what you were in ways that cannot be fully erased. The physicists are careful, but the physics, allowed to speak for itself, in the dark, without the professional caution, says something close to what the oldest human intuitions have always said. You matter, and matter is not destroyed. There is something that happens to the quality of thinking late at night that is worth naming before we go further. During the day, the mind tends to stay close to the practical. It moves between tasks, between problems that have solutions, between questions that have answers. It is a tool being used, and tools stay sharp by being applied to specific work. At night, especially the deep night, especially the night before sleep, the mind loosens its grip on the practical. The horizon of what feels like an appropriate question expands. Things that seem too large to think about during the day, too abstract, too far from anything actionable, begin to feel not only thinkable, but necessary, as if the night is the only time large enough to hold them. This is why we are here, you and I, in this particular hour. The question of what you are, fundamentally, what persists, what the universe keeps of you, is not a question that the daytime mind usually allows itself to sit with. It is too large. It has no practical consequence in the immediate sense. It doesn't help with the thing due tomorrow, or the conversation you need to have, or the choice waiting for a decision. But it is possibly the most important question there is, and the night allows it. So let's use the permission the night is giving us and go somewhere we don't usually go. What if the physics is right? What if the conservation laws, the block universe, the conservation of information, the cycling of matter, the quantum branching? What if all of this adds up to something that deserves the word immortal? Not immortal in the sense of unchanging, not immortal in the sense of continuing to experience as the person you are now, but immortal in the sense that nothing about you, nothing that has been part of you, disappears, in the sense that the universe carries you forward in every form it can, for as long as the universe continues. What would it feel like to take that seriously, not as a belief system, not as a comfort story, as a physical fact being considered with the same seriousness as any other physical fact? I think it would feel something like what you might be feeling right now, expansive, a little vertiginous, quietly enormous, the ordinary ceiling of the room becoming less solid, less final, as the mind holds something larger than the room. That feeling, whatever it is the appropriate response to the physics. You're allowed to have it. Let's visit a concept that physicists call emergence, because it has something important to say about the relationship between your individual existence and the larger systems you are part of. Emergence is what happens when a collection of simple things, following simple rules, produces behavior that couldn't have been predicted from the rules alone. Behavior that seems to be genuinely new, genuinely more than the sum of its parts. Water is wet, but no single water molecule is wet. Wetness is a property that emerges from the collective behavior of many molecules, from the way they interact with surfaces, with each other, with the things that move through them. You cannot find wetness in a single H2O molecule. It only appears at scale. A neuron fires or doesn't fire, that's all it does. But billions of neurons firing in coordinated patterns produce consciousness, memory, love, mathematics, music, the experience of lying in the dark, wondering about existence. None of those things can be found in a single neuron. They emerge from the collective, from the organization, from the pattern across the system. Emergence is one of the genuinely mysterious features of physics, because it seems to produce something genuinely new at higher levels of organization. The properties at the higher level are not simply the lower level properties added up. They are different in kind. This matters for tonight because it raises a question that has not been answered. When the organization that produces consciousness disperses, where does the emergent property go? In standard emergent systems, the emergent property disappears when the organization does. Wetness stops when the water molecules disperse enough. But consciousness is different in at least one crucial way. It appears to have something that wetness does not, which is interiority. There is something it is like to be conscious. In a way there is nothing it is like to be wet. Whether that interiority is another emergent property that simply vanishes with the organization, or whether it has some feature that the standard emergent and disperses model doesn't capture, is one of the open questions that physics and philosophy have not resolved. The honest answer is, we don't know. And we don't know in a direction that leaves genuine room for something more than the default assumption. Not proof, not certainty, but room. Legitimate, well-grounded, philosophically serious room. The mind that is settling towards sleep right now is something that the universe produced from simple rules and is now, perhaps, more than those rules alone can account for. That is worth holding quietly. There is a physicist named Max Tegmark who has proposed something called the mathematical universe hypothesis. It is a provocative idea, not widely accepted, but rigorous and serious. And it takes the question of what you are to a strange and interesting place. Tegmark's proposal is this: the universe is not described by mathematics. The universe is mathematics. Physical reality is not a thing that happens to be well modelled by mathematical structures. It is itself a mathematical structure. The distinction between the map and the territory, between the description and the thing described, does not hold at the deepest level. Reality is structure, all the way down. If this is true, it has an extraordinary implication for what you are. You're a self-aware substructure of a mathematical structure, a region of the structure that has become complex enough to model itself, to represent its own states, to have something like a perspective on the rest of the structure. And mathematical structures, in Tegmark's framework, do not exist in time, they exist, period. A mathematical structure is not created or destroyed, it simply is, completely, in the timeless sense that 2 + 2 = 4, regardless of whether the universe currently exists or not. If you are a substructure of a mathematical structure, then in some sense you exist in the timeless way that mathematical objects exist. The specific configuration that is you, at every moment of your life, is a substructure of a mathematical object that is simply there, not created, not destroyed, not dependent on the physical processes that instantiate it being currently ongoing. This sounds abstract. It is abstract. But abstract is not the same as wrong. The most durable things in existence may be the most abstract. Mathematical truth does not depend on anything external for its validity. 2 plus 2 equaled 4 before there was a universe, and will equal 4 after there is none. If what you are is information, organized in a particular way, then what you are may be, in the deepest sense, a mathematical fact. And mathematical facts do not end. This is not a mainstream view. Tegmark's is a minority position, held by a minority of serious thinkers who have thought carefully about what it means that the universe is so thoroughly mathematical. But in the quiet of tonight, it offers a way of thinking about yourself that is different from the usual, and that connects the physical facts we've been exploring to something even more fundamental. You're not just made of matter. You may be made of structure, and structure does not end. The night is deep now. The ideas have been large, and the mind has been generous in holding them, and now it is appropriate for the holding to become easier, gentler, less effortful. This is not the end of the thinking. It is a change in how the thinking is held. Think of the difference between gripping something and cradling it. Both are ways of holding. But gripping requires constant tension, constant attention, constant correction. Cradling uses the shape of the hand, the natural weight of the object, the relationship between them. Cradling is more sustainable. It is the way you hold something you intend to keep for a long time. The ideas from the first part of tonight, the conservation laws, the block universe, the cycling of matter, the conservation of information, the quantum branching, those are worth cradling rather than gripping. They are too large to hold tightly without exhausting the hand. But they settle comfortably into a cradled attention, and from there they continue to do their work quietly without requiring effort. So let the grip ease a little now. The matter persists. You know this. The energy persists. You know this. The block universe contains every moment of your life as a permanent fixture. You know this. The universe has never once destroyed anything in 14 billion years. You know this. And whatever you are, beyond the physical account, physics has not said it ends. It has said, carefully and precisely, that the question remains open, which is more room than is usually acknowledged. You're lying somewhere in the world, in the dark, with this inside you now, alongside everything else that is inside you at the end of a day. The body is heavy, the breath is slow, the day is behind you in a way it wasn't a few hours ago, and underneath all the specific ideas, what remains is something simpler, a quality of attention, a sense of scale, a feeling of being something larger than usual, connected to something longer than a single life, made of something older than this planet. That feeling is not an error. It is the appropriate response to physics taken seriously. It is the emotion that conservation of energy produces when you let it. Let it. There is a quality to starlight that becomes important once you know what it is. When you look at a star, you're not seeing the star. You're seeing light that left the star years or centuries or millennia ago, and has been travelling through the vacuum of space since then, and has just arrived at your eyes. You're seeing the past. The star you're looking at may not exist anymore. It may have changed beyond recognition. The light arriving now is the last transmission of something that may already be gone, and yet the light is real, arriving now, carrying real information about what was. There is something in this that rhymes with what we have been talking about. The pattern of a life is like starlight. By the time others perceive it, it has already travelled a distance. What they receive is a record, not the source, but the record is real. The light genuinely carries information about the star that emitted it. The image is not false, it is just prior. What does it mean to be perceived by the universe? Not by other people, though that is also real. By the physical universe, which keeps every record, which carries every causal trace of every event forward into the future. In the technical language of physics, every event leaves what is called a causal shadow, a set of future states of the universe that are different because the event occurred. Your existence casts a causal shadow across all of space-time that comes after you. Not a visible shadow, not a shadow that can be traced or read, but a shadow in the sense that the universe that follows your life is different from the universe that would have followed a universe that didn't contain you. You have already changed the world in ways that will propagate forward indefinitely. Not the dramatic changes, necessarily. Not the famous moments, if there are any. The ordinary ones, the words spoken, the weight placed on the floor, the breath released, the heat exchanged with the air. All of it, every physical interaction, however small, has altered the state of the world in ways that continue, because causality is real, and it does not stop. You are already immortal in the sense that the universe is already carrying you forward, in its physical record, in the causal shadow you have cast, in the light you have emitted into the world that is still travelling outward. Whether there is someone inside that light who can feel it travelling is the question that remains open, but the light is real, and light, once emitted, does not stop. The body is heavier now than it was. This is real, not feeling. The muscles are releasing their last held tensions, one group at a time, in the quiet accumulation of the night's full weight. This is a good time to let the ideas shift from something you are thinking to something you are simply holding. The way the body holds warmth without thinking about thermodynamics. The way the lungs hold air without thinking about oxygen. You're made of atoms that have crossed the galaxy. You know this now, not as a fact to analyze, but as a fact to carry. You are a pattern of energy that the universe has been maintaining, and will maintain until it transforms into other patterns. You know this not as a statement to examine, but as a reality to rest in. Every moment of your life exists permanently in the four-dimensional structure of space-time. This is not a belief. This is the geometry of special relativity applied to the specific object that is you, located at your specific coordinates in space and time. These are not ideas that require anything from you right now. They are facts that exist whether or not you are attending to them. They were true before tonight. They will be true after. What has changed tonight is simply that you know them, consciously, explicitly, in a way that allows them to shift the background of how the world feels. The background of how the world feels matters. It is not everything, but it is not nothing. The quality of the ground you stand on changes what it feels like to move through a life. If the ground is the thermodynamic certainty that nothing is destroyed, the causal permanence that nothing is forgotten, the space-time geometry that every moment is preserved, then the ground is more solid than most people allow themselves to notice. You're standing on something that has been there since the beginning of the universe, and you will be part of it, in one form or another, until whatever end the universe eventually finds for itself, which current physics suggests is very far away, and possibly non-existent. The breath is very slow now. The body is making its own decisions about where to go next. The mind is releasing, one thought at a time, the grip of the day, and underneath it all, carrying it, older than any individual thing that has ever existed, is the universe, which has never once destroyed anything, and which contains you, completely, permanently, in every form you've ever taken and every form you will take. Rest now. You are held. There is a quality of attention that only comes when the body is almost asleep, and the mind is still just awake enough to notice things without needing to do anything with them. You may be in that state now, or approaching it. The ideas no longer arriving with the sharpness of new information, but settling like fine silt in water that has stopped being disturbed. In this state, the large things become easier to hold, not because they have gotten smaller, because the need to understand them, to resolve them, to place them somewhere, has eased. They can be large and unresolved and still present, without the unresolvedness being a problem. The question of what persists, of what the universe keeps of you, of whether consciousness is a permanent feature of the structure of reality, or a temporary arrangement of matter that ends when the arrangement ends, that question has not been answered tonight. It cannot be answered tonight. It may not be answerable by any method currently known. But the question has been properly opened, not with false comfort, not with a claim that everything will be fine in the way that requires you to believe something unprovable, with something more durable, with the actual physics taken seriously, without the usual filters. The matter persists. This is not in question. The energy persists. This is not in question. The information, in the technical sense, persists in principle. This is the consensus of most contemporary theoretical physicists. The space-time coordinates of every moment of your life are permanent features of the four-dimensional structure of reality. This follows from the geometry of special relativity. The cycles that will receive your atoms are ancient and will continue long after. And the question of what all this means for the inner light of your experience is genuinely open, not answered in the negative, not answered in the positive, open in the specific, carefully considered way that science at its best is open, which means we have looked carefully and we cannot say it ends, and the question deserves more respect than it usually gets. You're not required to believe anything you haven't verified, but you are permitted to notice that the universe, as described by physics, is considerably more hospitable to something like your continuation than the standard casual dismissal suggests. The dismissal was never based on evidence. The evidence points in a different direction. Let that be the last precise thought, and then let the thought soften, as thoughts do. Near sleep, the breath comes and goes, each one the same as the last, and yet each one new. The air that fills the lungs was somewhere else a moment ago. The air that leaves was inside you, warm, carrying the traces of what happened in there. It goes back into the world, changed slightly, becoming something else. Each breath a small version of everything we have been talking about. In, out, in, out. Nothing created, nothing destroyed, everything transformed, continuously, at the rate of one breath every few seconds, at the rate of one heartbeat every second, at the rate of millions of chemical reactions per moment. In every cell of a body that is both you and the universe doing something with its matter. The body doesn't need your direction to do this. It does it on its own, in sleep, without consciousness, without intention, following the rules that are built into it, that are built into the matter it is made of. In sleep, the body continues. The chemistry continues. The atoms continue their transactions, their bonds made and broken, their electrons shared and returned. The matter that is you keeps being organized, keeps maintaining the pattern, keeps running the cycles that have been running since before any organism existed. And the mind, in sleep, continues in its own way, processing, consolidating, finding patterns in the day that the waking mind missed, building the connections that will be there, mysteriously, when morning comes, doing the maintenance that the daytime running couldn't stop for. Sleep is not absence, it is a different mode of presence, a mode the universe runs more smoothly, more sustainably than the waking one, a mode that has been running in living things for hundreds of millions of years, longer than many entire categories of complex life have existed. You're about to become the ancient thing that living creatures do at night. You're about to join the long unbroken chain of organisms that have closed their eyes in the dark and trusted the universe to maintain the pattern until morning. And the universe has a very good track record on this. It has maintained the pattern of living things through hundreds of millions of years of nights, through ice ages and mass extinctions and every catastrophe that has ever reshaped life on this planet. It will maintain yours through this one. The breath, in, out, the body heavier, the mind releasing, the universe holding, as it has always held, everything it has ever made. There is a word for what the body is doing right now. In the language of thermodynamics, it's called a dissipative structure. Ilya Prigogine, who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1977, showed that complex ordered structures can maintain themselves and even grow more complex by dissipating energy, by taking in energy from the environment, using it to maintain their organization, and releasing it in a lower quality form. A flame is a dissipative structure. It takes in fuel and oxygen, maintains its pattern of burning, and releases heat and light and carbon dioxide. The flame is not made of fixed material. Different molecules are burning every moment. The flame is a pattern maintained by the flow of energy through it. You are a dissipative structure, a more complex one than a flame, but the same principle. You take in food and oxygen, use the energy to maintain the extraordinarily complex organization that is a living body, and release heat and carbon dioxide and other metabolic products. The specific atoms in you are constantly changing. The pattern is maintained by the flow. This is a beautiful and important thing to know about yourself. You're not a fixed object, you're a process, a pattern maintained in flowing matter, the way a whirlpool is a pattern maintained in flowing water. The specific water molecules that make up the whirlpool change constantly, but the whirlpool persists, as long as the conditions that maintain it hold. And when the conditions change, the whirlpool doesn't disappear. The water continues, now without the vortex, carrying the energy that the vortex had organized, dispersing it into the broader flow. You're a whirlpool, a spectacularly complex one, made of matter that has been flowing through the universe for 13 billion years, organized for a time into a pattern that experiences itself, that wonders about its own nature, that lies in the dark asking questions about whether it is immortal. And the answer, in the thermodynamic sense, is the same as the answer for the whirlpool. The pattern will eventually dissolve into the broader flow. The matter will continue, in other patterns, in other flows. The energy will not be lost. And whether the experience of being the whirlpool, of being the vortex, of being the particular organized thing that wonders about itself, whether that experience is itself a kind of pattern that the universe carries forward in some form, is the question that remains, open, respectfully open in the dark. The ideas are softer now. They arrive less as arguments and more as presences, less as things to think about and more as things to breathe with. This is the right relationship to have with them at this hour. The universe is very old. It has been doing this for longer than the Earth has existed, longer than stars of this generation have burned, longer than the elements that make up this body were formed. 14 billion years of conservation, of transformation, of pattern and dispersal and new pattern. And in that vast history, you are here, now, this night, not a side effect, not an accident in the sense of something the universe didn't intend, because the universe doesn't intend. It follows rules, and the rules, followed consistently, produced you, just as they produced everything, the atoms, the stars, the planets, the chemistry, the biology, the nervous system, the consciousness, the capacity to wonder, the night, the dark, the question, all of it, rule following, all the way down, from the Big Bang to this breath. And somewhere in the middle of that rule following, something happened that we don't fully understand. Something became aware, not of everything, not of its own full nature, but of something, of the night, of the dark, of the question, of the strange and enormous fact of existing at all. That awareness is not nothing. It is, arguably, the most extraordinary thing the universe has produced, more extraordinary than stars, which follow rules without knowing it, more extraordinary than chemistry, which produces complexity without experiencing it, something that experiences its own existence, something that can be moved by the idea that it might be permanent, something that can be frightened by the idea that it might not be, something that can lie in the dark and ask, "You are that something," and the universe, which has been running for 14 billion years without destroying anything, produced you and is currently maintaining you and will transform you when the time comes into other forms that will carry the traces of what you were. That is the physical fact. Whether it is enough, whether it is what you needed to hear, whether the question you brought into tonight has been answered in the way you hoped, that is personal, and only you know. But the physics is honest, and the physics says you're not nothing, and you will not become nothing, and you never have been. Rest with that. The room is very quiet now. Not just the room, something inside the room, something inside you. The particular quiet that comes when the mind has been to a large place and has come back, not all the way back, but part way, to the edge where large and immediate exist together, where the scale of the universe and the weight of the body are both present at once. You're in that edge now. The universe is 14 billion years old, and you are here, in it, in this specific moment, in this specific room, in this specific body that is doing all the extraordinary things that bodies do when they are alive. The heart beats. You didn't ask it to. It has been doing it since before you were born, since before you existed as anything recognizable, since the first weeks when the arrangement that became you was just beginning to organize itself. The breath moves. You didn't ask it to. Not right now. It is doing what it does, what it has done for every organism that has ever breathed, what it will do until the morning. Without your supervision, the cells divide and maintain and repair, and the chemistry runs, and the neurons do whatever they do between sleep and dreaming, and all of it, every bit of it, is matter following rules. Matter that has been following rules for 13.8 billion years. Matter that does not know how to stop. Matter that does not know how to become nothing. You're made of that matter. You're that matter. And that matter. right now, is settling into the particular configuration that living things assume when they surrender to sleep. The muscles at their most relaxed, the breath at its slowest waking rate, the body at its most trusting. This is what 14 billion years of physics has produced tonight. This specific body, in this specific room, on this specific planet, trusting the universe enough to close its eyes. The trust is warranted. The universe has not yet destroyed anything it has made, and it has been making things, and keeping them, and transforming them, and carrying them forward for longer than any mind can hold. Your mind doesn't need to hold it right now. Your body knows. Let the body lead. The space between thoughts is widening. This is the right direction. The mind is doing what it does at the end of its day, releasing the structures it built, allowing the energy it organized into thinking to return to a different kind of circulation. Even this, even the dissolution of thought into sleep, is a version of what we have been talking about. The organized energy of conscious attention, dispersing, redistributing, becoming the particular kind of brain activity that sustains life in the night, less structured, but not absent, different, but not gone. The you that wakes up tomorrow will have been transformed by tonight, not dramatically, but really. The conversations between neurons that happened while you listened, the connections reinforced, the memories encoded, the emotional residue of having been in the presence of large ideas for an hour or two, all of that will be slightly different tomorrow. You will be slightly different tomorrow, not unrecognizably, just slightly. The way every day changes you slightly, adds to the accumulation, shifts the pattern by some imperceptible degree. The pattern changes continuously, has been changing since the first cell divided, since the first neuron fired, since you were something much simpler than you are now. And yet there is something that persists through all the change, something that is recognizable as you across the decades, across the transformations, across the complete replacement of your physical material every few years. Whatever that something is, it has proven remarkably resilient. The universe produces resilient patterns. That is one of the things it does, not because it plans to, but because patterns that are not resilient don't persist long enough to be noticed, and patterns that are resilient accumulate and become more complex, and eventually become the kind of thing that wonders about its own resilience. Here you are, wondering, at the edge of sleep, in a universe that has never once destroyed anything it made. The wondering is the most extraordinary part, more extraordinary than the atoms that do the wondering, more extraordinary than the energy that organizes them, more extraordinary than the conservation laws that ensure they continue. Something wonders in the dark. And that is the thing that physicists find hardest to talk about, because it doesn't fit in any equation. And yet it is, undeniably, here. You are here. That fact is not fragile. The breath comes more slowly now, in and out. And the body is so heavy, so settled, so finished with the day that even the thoughts are becoming less like thoughts and more like weather, moving through without requiring attention. The large ideas of tonight are still there, not gone, not resolved, but no longer requiring effort. They have become part of the background, the way the sound of a fan or the temperature of a room becomes background once you stop noticing it. The conservation laws are running right now in every atom of this body. The block universe contains this moment, permanently at its coordinates. The matter that is you is in the middle of a cycle that has been running for billions of years and will run for billions more. None of this requires your awareness to be true. It is true regardless. It was true before tonight, and it will be true in the morning, and it is true in every moment between, including the moments you spend asleep. The universe maintains you without your participation. You do not have to work at existing. The chemistry does it. The physics does it. The 4 billion years of biological history encoded in every cell does it. All you have to do right now is allow it. Allow the breath. Allow the heaviness. Allow the release of whatever the day still has hold of in some corner of the mind or the body. The ideas will be there in the morning. The questions will be there. The open door between physics and something larger will still be open. Nothing will be resolved, because resolution was never the point. The point was the opening, the expansion, the permission to take the physics seriously, to follow the conservation laws to their honest conclusion, to notice that the universe is considerably more careful with its contents than we usually allow ourselves to believe. You are one of its contents, carefully made from material it has been keeping since the beginning, carefully maintained by rules that have not bent for 14 billion years, and carefully held right now in the ordinary, extraordinary physics of a body breathing in the dark. Nothing is lost. Nothing is lost. You can rest. There is a sound in this silence that isn't quite sound. It is the sound of a very large thing being very still. The universe, in all its 14 billion years of activity, is mostly quiet. The explosions and collisions and supernovae are real, but they are local, distributed across a vastness so enormous that on average, on the scale of the whole, there is more silence than anything else, more dark than light, more stillness than motion. You're in the middle of that silence right now. A small warm region of organized chemistry in an enormous dark quiet. A temporary concentration of order in a universe that is mostly otherwise. A pattern complex enough to know it is a pattern, and to find that knowledge both exhilarating and peaceful. The stars outside, if you could see them, are doing what they have always done. Burning, fusing, slowly spending the hydrogen they were made of, in exchanges that take billions of years, that produce the heavy elements that eventually become planets and oceans and the water in your cells. The Earth is turning, slowly, as it always does, at the rate that produces the day and the night that organizes your body's chemistry, that tells the cells when to be active and when to rest. The solar system is moving through the galaxy, slowly, on its long orbit around the galactic center that takes 230 million years. The last time you were in this position in the galaxy, there were no mammals. The last time before that, there was no complex life. And yet here, impossibly, in the middle of all that time and space and turning and burning, here is this, a mind, at rest, in a room, in a body, in the dark, knowing it is made of stars, knowing it is temporary and permanent at once, knowing, in the honest and open way that physics allows, that nothing about it has ever been destroyed, and nothing about it will be. This knowledge does not require you to do anything with it. It is simply true, quietly, underneath everything, like the hum of a universe that has been running long enough to produce something that can hear it. You can hear it. Let it carry you now. The atoms are very still. Not truly still, because atoms are never truly still. Thermal motion ensures that, but still in the sense that matters. Still in the sense that the body feels still. Still in the sense that the day's agitation is released, and what remains is the baseline, the low hum, the minimum energy configuration that a body needs to maintain itself in the night. This is the most honest the body gets, without performance, without effort, without the layer of tension that even relaxed waking requires. Just the chemistry, the pulse, the breath, doing what physics says they do. You are, right now, at your most fundamental. Not stripped of everything, not reduced to just atoms, but all the way down to the irreducible fact of a living body in the dark, following the rules that matter follows, running the cycles that life runs, doing exactly what the universe set up for you to do in this hour. There is nothing missing, nothing lacking, nothing that the night requires, and that you're not already providing simply by being here, breathing, alive. This is enough. This particular arrangement of matter and energy and history lying in the dark after a day of being whatever you are in the world is enough, is more than enough, is, by any honest measure, extraordinary. The universe took 13.8 billion years to produce a body that can lie down and rest. It took 4 billion years of biology. It took every generation of every organism that ever lived, the entire cumulative history of life on this planet, to arrive at the specific kind of nervous system that can ask the questions you ask tonight. And now that system is resting, as it should, as it has always done, since organisms first developed the cycle of waking and sleeping, since the very first cells responded to the rhythm of the turning planet. You're doing something ancient. You're doing something the universe designed, in the sense that anything can be designed by unthinking rules followed consistently, and you're doing it in the company of every living thing that has ever done it before you, all the way back to the beginning of life, all the way forward to whatever life comes after. Sleep is not a departure. It is the most continuous thing you do. The thoughts are almost gone now. Not gone in the way that would end things, just gone in the way thoughts go when the mind is finished using them for today. Released, returned to wherever thoughts come from and go to, which is itself one of the questions physics has not answered, and which is fine, and which can wait for another night. Tonight has been enough. Tonight has been more than enough. You came to this with a question, or something that functions like a question, even if it was more of a feeling than a sentence, a wondering about what you are, what persists, what the universe keeps. And the physics has answered, as clearly as physics can, which is, more than you thought, more is kept, less is lost. The conservation is more complete, the permanence more real, the continuation more certain than the casual culture of mortality usually admits. Not everything you hoped for, perhaps. The specific continuity of experience, the persistence of the felt sense of being you, is the part that remains open, that physics has not closed, that the hard problem of consciousness keeps from being settled either way. But more than nothing, considerably more than nothing, the matter is permanent, the energy is permanent, the information is permanent, in principle. The space-time coordinates of this moment are permanent. The causal shadow you cast across the future is permanent, in the sense that the future is different because you are here, and that difference does not undo itself. You are permanent in at least 4 distinct, well-grounded, physically rigorous ways, and whether there is a 5th way, whether the experience is also in some sense permanent, whether the universe keeps not just the atoms and the information and the space-time location and the causal trace, but also the inner light, the felt quality, the being you-ness of being you. That is the question that remains, properly open, deserving of respect, and available for another night. For now, the body has what it needs. The mind has been taken somewhere large and has come back softened and is ready for what comes next. What comes next is not complicated. It is just sleep, just the ancient, ordinary, extraordinary thing that living things do, and you are a living thing in a universe that keeps everything going to sleep. The room is so quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't absence, it is presence, the presence of everything that isn't making noise, the walls, the floor, the air, the objects that exist in this room with you, all of them exactly where they are, all of them following the same conservation laws, all of them made of atoms as old as yours, all of them permanent in the same ways you are permanent, all of them part of the same universe that has been keeping things since the beginning. You're not alone in this room, in the sense that nothing is alone in the universe. Everything shares the same matter, the same energy, the same history, the same laws. The distinction between you and the air around you, the boundary between inside and outside, is real, and it is also much more porous and much more permeable than it feels. You're exchanging matter with your environment with every breath. You're exchanging heat. You're in continuous transaction with everything around you in the quiet, ongoing way that physics requires. This is not a metaphor for connection. It is the description of what is actually happening, physically, in this room, right now. You're not sealed inside yourself. You're open, slightly, always, to the matter and energy of the world, and the world is open to you. And this openness is what keeps you alive, because a truly closed system would be isolated from the energy flows it needs to maintain its organization. You're alive because you are open. You're maintained because the universe is willing to keep transacting with you. Keep exchanging heat and matter and energy. Keep running the flows through you that your organization requires. And when the organization eventually cannot maintain itself, the openness continues. The matter and energy flow out more than they flow in. The pattern can no longer hold its shape, and the contents of the pattern return to the broader flow from which they were temporarily drawn. Return, not disappear. The universe takes back what it lent, but it doesn't destroy it. It puts it back into circulation, back into the ancient economy of matter and energy that has been running since the first seconds. You will be returned, in time, to something larger. For now, you're borrowed, organized, here, and the universe is glad to have lent you sleep, in the very last moments before sleep. The mind sometimes does something strange and beautiful. It sees things, not quite images, not quite thoughts, somewhere between. A face that isn't anyone specific, a place that doesn't exist, a colour with a feeling attached to it, something geometric and shifting, something warm. These are hypnagogic images, the first experiments of a dreaming brain, the mind beginning to generate rather than receive, beginning the process of making meaning from its own material rather than from the world outside. You may be there now, or close. In that state, the ideas from tonight have already begun their transformation. They are no longer arguments or facts or statements. They are becoming something more like feelings, textures, presences. The conservation of energy becomes a warmth. The block universe becomes a feeling of solidity, of being held inside something that doesn't move. The cycling of matter becomes something like breath, like rhythm, like the in and out that has been happening this whole time. The ideas are becoming the thing they were always pointing toward. Not explanation, experience, not the map, the territory. You're lying in a universe that has been running for 14 billion years and has never once stopped, never once allowed anything to become nothing. You're made of the oldest material in existence. You occupy coordinates in a four-dimensional structure that is permanent. You cast a causal shadow across the future that cannot be erased. You carry inside you the question of whether the experience of being you is also permanent. And that question is genuinely open, and the openness is itself a form of space, a room in the physics that no one has been able to close. And tomorrow, all of this will still be true, and the day after, and in every form the universe transforms you into, whether recognizable or not. The conservation will hold, the laws will run, the cycles will continue, and whatever you are will be part of what continues. For now, just this, the breath, the dark, the body that has carried you through another day, and is carrying you now into the night, and will carry you into tomorrow. Something that wonders, something that is, something the universe has chosen, in its rule-following, non-choosing way, to keep. Good night. You made it to the end of this night. From the question at the beginning, where are you? What time is it? What kind of dark surrounds you? All the way through the conservation laws, the block universe, the cycling of atoms, the information that persists, the quantum branches, the hard problem, the causal permanence, the thermodynamic beauty of a dissipative structure that knows what it is. You've been somewhere large tonight, and before sleep finishes what it has been patiently waiting to do, one last thing. If something in this journey shifted something in you, if the physics landed differently tonight than it usually does, if the idea that you're immortal in at least 4 well-grounded ways felt like more than a thought experiment, if the night feels different now than it did when you first press play, then tell someone. Leave a like, not because the number matters, but because it tells the universe that this kind of thinking, this particular way of spending the dark, is worth passing on to someone else who might need it tonight. Subscribe to Sleep Space, if you haven't yet, because there is more of this waiting. More nights of taking physics seriously, more large ideas held gently in the dark, more permission to take what science actually says and follow it to where it honestly leads. And leave a comment. This is the part that means the most. Tell us where you are, not just the city or the country, though those matter. Tell us what kind of night it is there. Is it raining? Is it summer or winter? Are you in a place you've lived for years or somewhere you only recently arrived? Are you alone, or is someone asleep nearby who doesn't know you're still awake thinking about thermodynamics and eternity? Every comment is a point of light, a specific place on the planet where someone stayed awake long enough to take the question seriously. And together, all those points, from every time zone and every language and every kind of night, form something that looks, from far enough away, like exactly what it is, a species sitting in the dark, wondering about itself, refusing to stop asking. We are. Here, we read every one, and we're genuinely glad, in the small quiet way that matters most, that you spent this night with us. The universe is keeping you, and so are we. Good night.